Perhaps like you, I've been enjoying the Song of Solomon series in chapel this year, but some of you may have been made uncomfortable with it. And if so, I sympathize. I hope it's not because you blush at describing one's relationship with God in romantic terms, because if that's what makes you uncomfortable, there's really no escape from it. God is a lover. You and I are desirable to him. And the sooner we get used to that, the better. But when I say I sympathize with those of you who are uncomfortable with the Song of Solomon series, I'm speaking about something far more practical. Because the series has also been filled with counsel, really good counsel, I should add, about how to nurture romantic relationships. And that's great if you're in one or seeking to be in one. But some of you might be in a romantic relationship you want to get out of. And the more we dig into the Song of Songs, which we're not done with yet, Professor Kreiner is going further into it next week, the more this relationship you're in has the potential to intensify. And the more difficult I'm imagining it would be to get out of it. This is a tough semester for a breakup. But that's why I was brought in to help. In the midst of fostering advice on fostering healthy romantic relationships, I'm going to interject advice on how to end one. It's the special expertise I bring to the table, okay? So I warn you, this is the nuclear option, okay? It will work, and there is no turning back. Only use my patented strategy if you are desperate. Here's how it works, okay? You only have one window the first time you meet your significant other's parents, which is usually a sign that the relationship is taking off, but yours is about to crash. Let me walk through the strategy with you. First, imagine the scene. You see your significant other's parents for the first time, and just after they are introduced, you turn to your beloved and say, I don't care about these people. I care about you. Nothing competes with my love for you. And then comes the crucial follow-through. As the panic manifests in your significant other's widening eyes, your would-be in-laws stretch out their hands for a handshake, and you slap those hands away. You turn to your beloved and you reassert, nothing can compete with my love for you, especially not these people. And at this point, if all goes well, congratulations, you are single. Okay? You're welcome. Okay. Now, I wonder if some of you see where I'm going with this strange opening illustration. And so, without further delay, let me go there. You love Jesus, right? I sure hope you do. Have you met his parents? Do you know his mother Mary and his earthly father Joseph? Do you love them? Or when they reach out their hands to you, do you turn to Jesus and say, no, Lord, I only have eyes for you. Nothing can compete with that. Of course, you intuitively understood that the reason my opening advice would end a relationship is because such behavior would testify to a profound misunderstanding of relationships, the assumption of competition where there is none. Knowing the parents of your boyfriend or girlfriend is actually evidence that a relationship is deepening. It's not competitive, it's supplementary. I love my wife's parents, and she loves mine, and that has helped our marriage along considerably. And while I guess there might be some people who love their in-laws more than their husband or wife, frankly, that's kind of weird, right? Just like it's kind of weird if someone were to love Mary or Joseph more than Jesus, even though there's been a good bit of that in church history. We evangelicals have thankfully overcorrected such mistakes. But in order to deepen our relationship with Jesus, maybe it's time to meet the in-laws. I once gave a Sunday school session on Mary at an evangelical church, and a man walked up to me afterwards privately, a man in his 70s, and said, I've been cheated. It's not that he felt cheated by my talking about Mary at an evangelical church. He felt cheated by decades of evangelicalism that didn't talk about her enough. And we can learn a lot from Joseph as well. But I'm going to talk about Mary this morning. It's a good time. It's Advent. The traditional time to ponder the one who pondered all these things in her heart. And the place to find Mary is not first in the tradition, but first in the scriptures. The tradition tells us that Luke was an icon painter as well as a gospel writer and physician. He was a busy guy. And these are just a few of the icons that claim to be painted by Luke. I'm not sure I buy those legends. But maybe this icon legend stems from the truth that Luke is the best portrait painter of Mary that we have, but it's a verbal portrait. And we just heard it read by Professor Lewis. And what does Luke tell us? That there was a serious capital campaign going on in Jerusalem. Herod was building God a 4-star hotel. But about 50 miles or so away from the Jerusalem temple building bustle, that is to say, not in a Chicago high-rise, but in an insignificant place like Aurora or Elgin or Wheaton, God was about to lay the foundation of his own temple. Greetings, favored one. The Lord is with you, says Gabriel. Or as the more famous translation puts it, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. The angel is not worshiping Mary. In Greece today, the same word translated hail is just a formal way to say hello. Grace to you. You're going to have a baby. It's a boy. You'll be spared the agony of name decisions. It's Jesus. Feminist scholars have long pointed out that there is not a hint of coercion in this passage. Gabriel waits for her consent. And she raises her hand. Some of you did on Monday. Yes, I'd like Jesus in my body. She does seem to have had the ancient equivalent of a sex ed class, so she asks, how can this be? I'm a virgin. And then comes the explanation. And I learned from Darrell Bach, a Wheaton board member's fantastic, massive 2-volume commentary on Luke, that Gabriel uses temple language in his explanation. The Holy Spirit will come upon you. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. That Greek word overshadow is also used to describe the Shekinah cloud that rested on the tabernacle. And that makes Mary the temple that Herod was trying to construct himself. I don't know what you think about the church year, but let me assure you, it is not just for hipster Christians. It's biblical. It's premised on the Jewish year that Jesus knew, and Advent this week is the start of the church year. The moment of the Annunciation that we just talked about, however, is celebrated on March 25th, fittingly enough, 9 months before December 25th. But we are not at December 25th yet. Retailers have been there since September, profiting from premature Christmas celebrations. But before the swaddled baby comes the swollen belly. And at this point, Jesus has been inside that womb for 8 months. And my guess is that Mary wants him evicted. This is Advent, the season of pregnancy, and if we had to visualize it, it would be hard to do much better than this. The icon is called the Virgin of the Sign from Isaiah. Unto you a sign shall be given. A virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Or as I like to call it, ultrasound Jesus. Now, you might think of it as target practice for your devotional life. If this was a target, what would you aim for? The bullseye, Jesus. Do not aim up with your primary affections. Aim at him. Nevertheless, without a womb to reside in, how could he have come to us? Without my wife's parents, there would be no my wife. So yes, they matter. And Jesus chose to come through Mary, and so she matters as well. Do you notice the angels to the left and the right of the icon? They evoke the Ark of the Covenant, between which was what? Nothing. Because we cannot depict God. But in Jesus, in the womb of Mary, God was depicting himself. And according to the early Christians, that is what makes images like this permissible. There is a lot of condemnable religious art, to say nothing of advertisements, and so we can never give up our iconoclastic, image-breaking Christian birthright. But the best icons are not our guesses at God. They are instead reflections of revelation, and this is one of the best of them. The pagans of the ancient world, men like Porphyry, they hated the idea that God would dwell in a womb. Pagans generally hated the way that Christianity offered equal dignity to women, and this was the ultimate affront. This image does not suggest that God is a mother. It suggests something far more daring, that God has one, just as you and I each have a mother. There he is in his new temple constructed of flesh and blood. And even while residing in her womb, he is fully divine. But paradoxically, he's also dependent upon her for nutrients. And so that means you're looking at the end of patriarchy, the unjust rule of men over women. God Almighty willingly dependent upon a woman. As the 5th century Christian poet, and it's the poets who understand this, Sedulius put it, God descends, the world's maker made himself obey the law of birth. The unmarried virgin looks with wonder at her swollen womb and sees she is bearing her own creator. This means that God has dignified human nature from the ground up. The Anglican Lancelot Andrewes says, our conception is the root, as it were, the very ground sill of our nature. And so he went to the root and prepared our nature from the very foundation. This is the good of Christ, an embryo. And this means that what happens in the womb, every womb, is sacred business. Not just pagans, but some Christians were uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. That which was formed in the womb is not itself God, insisted Nestorius, extending to God a saving compromise, trying to keep things from getting too messy. Maybe Mary just generated the envelope in which the divinity was deposited after birth, but as Calvin and Luther knew so well, Nestorius was wrong. And the women in the streets of Constantinople cheered when Proclus opposed him, addressing the womb, the temple itself. O womb in which the decree of our liberation was composed, come and see the womb of a virgin wider than all creation. Wider than the heavens is in fact another name for this icon. And we might update that to say wider than the Laniakea supercluster, the name astronomers have given to the family of 100,000 galaxies around us, one of which is our Milky Way. Now, what I just described, it's not new. It's the bedrock of Christian orthodoxy. All Christians confess this mystery. Not all Christians except conservative Protestants, especially conservative Protestants. There is good reason the virgin birth was one of the fundamentalists' 5 fundamentals. Liberal Protestants were explaining this unfathomable mystery away, and they were rightfully resisted. But why then is this new to you as it was new to me? Why is that? One reason for the omission, of course, is due to the perceived excesses of Roman Catholic and Orthodox Christians regarding the in-laws, specifically Mary. But rather than caricaturing what we think other Christians believe, we do well to remember that there are a good many Orthodox and Catholic Christians in this chapel right now. Because you can be an Orthodox and Catholic student and be at Wheaton. And such students are a gift to this place. It's not that we should gloss over disagreements. In fact, this is a great place to debate them. And that disagreement mostly resolves around whether or not Mary herself had original sin. All Christians, Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox, believe she needed Jesus. No one believes she's a goddess. But the question is whether or not Jesus preserved her from sin completely, or whether she was saved like you and me. I don't want to get lost in that debate right now. Instead, I want to issue a challenge to Christians of all kinds, because maybe that whole debate about her sinlessness is a distraction from the personal challenge to, like her, bear Christ within ourselves. Again, Song of Songs series. You've been using erotic language to describe your relationship with God, and I know it's mushy. But if you were to try to get away from it by stealing off to the secular environments of the University of Chicago, Northwestern, and Harvard, you would just encounter it again. because the best medieval historians at those institutions, frustrated with Freudian reductions of Christian mysticism, have been digging into Christian commentaries on the Song of Songs for some time, taking such rhetoric on its own terms. And one of those professors, Bernard McGinn, said that all the best Christians knew that sexual congress, metaphorical union with God, leads to childbirth. The mature Christian soul abandons the delights of the mystical marriage to return to the active love symbolized by the duties of a busy mother. We're meeting in the art department, 3rd floor, for Advent prayer. And the gospel reading for this morning is, "Who is my mother? And who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hands towards his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Jesus calls us to be his siblings, yes, but weirdly enough, he calls us to be his mom. Which is to say, Jesus turns our born-again language, which frankly could use a little refreshment, on its head. Yes, we should be born again. That is justification. And born-again language is therefore rightfully dear to evangelicals. But Jesus should also be born again in us. That's sanctification. Paul uses the same metaphor even more directly. Writing to the Galatians, he says, "My dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." And following Jesus and Paul, no small authorities, the Christian tradition is filled with this language. There's Augustine in the West. The Virgin was pregnant by incarnation. Let our breasts be pregnant with faith in Christ. And there's Simeon, the new theologian in the East. Each conceives in like manner to her, within himself, the God of all, as she bore him in herself. Or to bring it even closer to home, take Chaplain Blackman's words on Monday. Your body is designed for spiritual union with Jesus Christ. And that is to say that whether or not we are literally mothers, which rules out all the men in this chapel and most of the women, we are all called to be spiritual bearers of Christ in a similar way. To be Christophers, Christophoros, Christ bearers. And that is to say that the world does not need your virtue, genius, or goodness, important as those things are. It needs something far more interesting. It needs Jesus Christ born again in you. And we are not just stuck with old icons if we want to explore this theme. It's in modern art as well. The 20th century Jewish artist Marc Chagall was fascinated by Russian icons. And he even produced a version of the Virgin of the Sign. And we can even see it in contemporary art, which means things are going to get a bit weird, but bear with me. Your student ID is a free ticket to the Art Institute anytime it is open. And I sure hope that you're using it. Because at the Art Institute right now is a show by the African architect David Adjaye that culminates with a view of the Sea of Galilee. And that might not mean something to a standard secular viewer, but it will mean something to you. Go and see it. But there's also this, a strange looping video at the Art Institute right now. The artist Moriko Mori is dressed up as an extraterrestrial visitor who toys with a crystal ball for half an hour. The gallery label says she is a shaman, quote, who acts as intermediary between the earthly and spiritual realms, end quote. It's the stuff designed to shock middle-aged suburban white guys like me. But the thing is, Maury's video reminds me of something. It reminds me of the precious stones that were deposited in medieval art to represent the Christ child inside Mary and John the Baptist inside Elizabeth. Maybe Mariko Mori's looping video is actually profoundly insightful. I'm not saying it's Christian, but maybe it reveals a deep human longing to bear the sacred within us. And that is not surprising if, again, to recall the words from Monday, your body, all bodies, are designed for spiritual union with Jesus Christ. But my favorite of these visual admonitions to bear Christ within us comes from a 17th century Dutch Protestant painter, Rembrandt. And what I love about this painting is that it conveys the intimacy of daily life, the intimacy that Jesus entered into and thereby dignified. Infinity dwindled to infancy, as the theologian Edward Oakes put it. Now, admittedly, Rembrandt shows us Jesus outside the womb, and that's not very Advent-y, right? It's Christmassy. But look to the other in-law, Joseph, and look at the basket beneath him. It's not accidental. She has literally borne Jesus, and he is called to be a mother to Christ as well, bearing him within him, welcoming him into his body. Bernard of Clairvaux says that humility is the void in the soul which love fills. Humility readily attracts the divine majesty. And too often, I cannot bear Christ within me because my basket is pretty full. Advent is a good time to empty it. And sometimes your basket gets emptied for you. That is what happened with my friend Brett Foster as the cancer asserted itself, as the physicians described it. And believe me, I have spun my theories about what God was doing in letting Brett die of cancer, but I have grown to distrust those theories. You shouldn't listen to Job's friends anyway. Better to listen to Job. And just like we have Job's words preserved, we have Brett's. And he tells us in his late poetry what he felt God was doing in his life. It is possible that this sickness, this crisis, the disease, Brett says, referring to his own cancer, may turn out to be a messenger sent before my face, a voice that was crying out in the wilderness of my abdomen. It's a very Advent poem, really, about the purification of the season, where such John the Baptist passages are read. And in another, he gave us a strangely Marian metaphor about how Christ was working deep within his body. There exists the tumor, cyst, or grisly polyp, and Christ resides, persists amid these 100 hells, his garment hemmed with pomegranates, golden bells. If you are going through one or more of those 100 hells, I have no words for you. But my friend Brett, who did go through them, says that Christ can harness them. And when Brett and Brenna Yance and Roger Lundeen were placed in the ground this semester, those were Advent moments as well. Your dead shall live. Their bodies shall rise, writes the prophet Isaiah. The earth will give birth to the dead. Isaiah uses words of pregnancy to describe the last day, and that is the other neglected aspect of Advent. We don't just anticipate the first coming of Christ in this season, but the second. Wars and rumors of war, terrorism, strange weather occurrences. These are our daily headlines, but Jesus predicted all of it after he predicted the destruction of Herod's temple. And he says in Matthew 24, "See to it that you are not alarmed. All these things are the beginning of birth pains." That is the strange juxtaposition of Advent. The pregnancy of the incarnation and the pregnancy of a groaning planet. We find ourselves between births, between the incarnation and the second coming. And the work that matters most in the meantime is birth-like as well. To bear Christ within us, or to take Paul's words in Colossians, to make known the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory.